Hi, I was a worker at HHS. I was fired illegally on February 14th. There are many people who are not getting social service programs, especially people with disabilities. Are you going to do anything to stop what's happening?
You probably deserved it.
I deserved it?
You probably deserved it.
I deserved it.
Dude,
Wow.
sad.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Why did I deserve it?
Because you seem like a clown.
Okay, sir, you shouldn't have said that.
That was Republican Senator Jim Banks. Jim Banks. You should have said that. Oh, he should have. Oh, he should have. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Fire Program. I am your host, Joe Nierman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. I apologize for my lateness. I'm truly sorry about that. I got a phone call like 2 minutes before showtime, and someone really needed my help. And yeah, so that's what we were doing. And I did what I could, and then we moved on. Tonight's show, we're going to be talking about various elections that happened today. Some good, some not looking so good. Not going to kid you, some of them not looking so good. That's first and foremost. Some good, some less good. Also want to talk to you about Representative Biggs and his proposal to have Judge Boasberg, the infamous and notorious Judge Boasberg, removed. And finally, tomorrow, we're an hour and 18 minutes away from Liberation Day. Liberation Day. We're going to break down for you what exactly Liberation Day means. It's supposed to be April 2nd. Today was April Fool's. Tomorrow is Liberation Day. What does that mean? How will that impact you? What impact has it had already? It's already had some impact, Liberation Day, even before it got here. And it's likely to have a significant impact. Question is if it's actually going to work out positively or not. A lot of people have concerns. So we're going to talk about that as well. But first and foremost, let's start off looking at the elections. We'll start with the with what's going on in Florida. We'll start with the good news. We'll start with the good news. So first and foremost, coming out of Florida, Randy Fine, Republican State Senator, District 6. This was the district that was vacated by Waltz when he was confirmed for his position in the Trump administration and had to abdicate his seat. So he's District 6, and that has 95% of the votes in. Randy Fine, the declared winner. A lot of people are not so excited about Randy Fine. Some people say, but to be fair, the guy he was replacing, like Waltz, was kind of So, yeah, it's the key is we got the seat. The key is we got that seat, and that's one more vote at least for things that we can count on neocons for to the extent we can. I'm not saying he is a neocon. I don't know very much about Randy Fine individually. I'm not weighing in on him. I don't want to prejudge the man. But that's the win we got there. And then if we look over into U.S. House District 1, the House seat that was vacated by Matt Gaetz, Jimmy Patronis ends up taking the seat, 56.9 to 42.3. Now, I was on a space yesterday. People were talking about the fact that this seat was won by 30 points. And this is some sort of report card on the Trump administration and the seriousness of this situation. It's a terribly sad, terrible situation. They're like, look, oh my God, look at this. We only have 70 days of Trump, and he's already his margin is being slashed dramatically. It used to be a 30-point win, and now it's only a 15-point win. So you might look at that and say, that's terrible. That's a bad sign as far as what the public thinks about Donald Trump and his work. You could make that. You could make that claim if you were an idiot. That would make a lot of sense to you. You'd be like, oh wow, oh that's of grave concern. Look at the report card we got. Oh no, look at our report card. It's so terrible. Oh no, the people don't love Trump. I know that because look in this district that Gates dominated in. Gates dominated in by 30 points, and now we're only winning it by under 15, 14 and a half points. That's a disaster. It's a calamity that's happening. That's what you could say if you're an idiot. Here's why I think you have to be an idiot to have that takeaway, that it's some sort of report card. Or that even if it were a report card, it's something you need to be concerning yourself with. First and foremost, District 1, which had Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz in his district was uniquely popular. He was uniquely popular. He was a very polarizing figure, and he was very, very popular. He was a very outspoken and well-known member of Congress. So him winning by 30 points is probably in at least some part due to the fact that this guy was very popular. He was the one who held up the entire House and basically snubbed his nose at DC when he said we got to get rid of the last speaker and try and get a replacement there. So, yeah, that to say that Matt Gaetz is being replaced and that his replacement isn't dominating as well as Matt Gaetz is a pretty stupid take as far as that being some sort of reflection on Donald Trump. Secondly, Republicans are notoriously poor at coming out for rando elections. We don't travel well, and it's a very big shortcoming. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this as a compliment. Quite the contrary. It's a poor reflection. But we don't come out nearly as well when you talk about special elections. Some election in the middle of April, we're not going to get the same numbers. So I don't think that's really comparable to a November election. November election, especially in a presidential year, everyone's coming out. Anyone who's ever voting is going to come out. So, yeah, I don't think that that's really reflective of it. But let's assume that we could glean something about the statement about Trump's work in the White House and how it's being received by the American public. And let's assume maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's not that fact that it's a special election which has drawn out a weaker, which has basically exposed one of the shortcomings in the GOP, that we don't travel well. When I say travel well, I'm making an allusion to the fact that when teams travel on the road, so a lot of people will look at how well do they travel, how many of their fans will tend to come out to the foreign location to support them. Some teams travel much better than others. The Cowboys seem to travel well. The Steelers travel well. The Raiders travel well. The Patriots travel pretty well. These are teams that they can go into a foreign team's arena and get a significant percentages of the seats. So when I'm talking about traveling well in the context of an election, I'm saying, do they come out when it's not a standard even year November election? It's an odd type of time to have an election. How well do we come out and travel and actually attend those elections? And unfortunately, I think Democrats are better at getting out the vote in these special elections. So that's what I'm referring to when I say travel well. That GOP does not travel well. So let's assume that I'm wrong. Let's assume it's not about a failure of the GOP to travel well. Let's assume that it's not about the fact that Matt Gaetz had a special appeal in his district, which is why he was able to outperform what that district should normally be turning out, and that Jimmy Petronis, who won the election now for the GOP, is closer to the actual number as to how red District 1 of Florida actually is. Let's say I'm wrong about that. Let's say this is sort of a reflection of the American public saying we're kind of frustrated. We're not too happy with the job Donald Trump's done in his first 70 days in office. How significant is that? Well, the answer to that is it doesn't matter at all. As far as our next election, it has no impact at all, even on our midterm elections. Because people, even if people are miserable today, furious at Donald Trump today, it doesn't matter. In an election, in a 2026 election, it doesn't have any impact as far as how the next elections are going to go. Because ultimately, if you're going to have a brutal year, which I think Donald Trump so far is having, an exceptional year, an exceptional 2025. I think he's doing phenomenal work. But let's say I'm not in the majority. Let's say you might think that way, and we together are not in the majority. It doesn't matter right now at all. You have to have some periods of growing pains in order to fix drastic problems. And as we're going to be talking about the tariffs that are coming tomorrow for Liberation Day, that I anticipate will bring with it some growing pains. You should anticipate there will be some pain, financial pain that we will feel in the short term. These are necessary in order to have a financial development in the long term. So it's not a matter of how are Americans feeling about the economy in the second week of April 2025. That's going to have zero impact on an election that in November of 2026. In November of 2026, you're getting a report card for how the president has been doing for the last 3 to 6 months at the maximum. Nobody remembered when they went to the ballot box in November of 2020 that in January of 2020, earlier that same year, that the State of the Union address, Donald Trump accurately reflected the most phenomenal report card as to how we were doing at that point in time. Nobody remembered it. All they were thinking about was George Floyd and riots and the pandemic and lockdowns and spending money and the economy. That's all they remembered. Nobody remembered it. Nobody ever remembers how they're doing 6 months later. I'll ask you right now, off the top of your head, are you thinking about how you were doing 9 months ago compared to how you were doing 12 months ago? It's very hard. The human memory doesn't work like that. So that's why I'm saying, assuming that Trump is accurate, that these different changes that he's implementing will be helpful to America, you would think that those benefits would be rather visible by middle of 2026. And assuming that's the case, that by June of 2026, everything is visible here, then 5 months of that going into November of 2026, we should have, you would think, a very healthy midterm election. Same too for 2028. But all that ultimately matters in an election. That's why when people talk about this isn't a report card, this is America making a statement to Donald Trump what they want. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. Here's the reality. Most Americans may talk about what they want. That doesn't mean they know ultimately long term what is beneficial for them economically. Now, I'm not saying that Trump has the right answers. I don't know that he does. I think it's very possible. I think there's evidence that we should give him our trust. But I'm simply saying some report card 2 months into his administration as to how Americans feel about him, or even if every American were to get up and vote as far as like, this is what I want him to do. I want him to do this with Social Security. I want him to do this with Doge. I want him to do this. It's a matter of none of that matters. Your opinion doesn't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. The opinions of the left don't matter. All that matters are the opinions of Trump and his administration. That's all that matters, ultimately. I mean, provided you don't have Congress go acting exceedingly wonky, but ultimately that's what's going to matter. So, that being the case, I say don't sweat that at all. I had a couple of chats that popped in here. Bella Stella gifting 10. 10 good Lawgic memberships. God bless. All hail Queen of Recruitment, Bella Stella. All hail Queen of Recruitment, Bella Stella. God bless you. God bless you, Bella Stella. Yes, Bella Stella. Is it too late for me to see who she bless you? It's likely too late. I want to welcome Willing Reality and all their viewers who joined the chat. I forgot to put a goal up. I stink. I meant to put a goal up. I'm going to do that now. Let's put a goal up. What's my goal? We'll see. 15 super chats of like yellow or higher in the next 2 hours. And if that happens, Okay, no, I'm going to change this, okay? This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. You know what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going out on a limb at the suggestion of one of you viewers out there who I happen to talk to on a fairly regular basis. I think it was Joe who made this suggestion to me. This is what I'm going to do, okay? This is what I'm doing. If I get $500 in super chats total tonight, which I can't really show that in here, $500 in total in super chats. 500. I know it's a lot, and I'll count things like the 10 Good Lawgic memberships as 50. Okay, so $500 total. I will sit through Snow White in a theater and report on that. 500. There you go. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. $500, and I will suffer through 2 hours of Rachel Zegler and that unbelievably awful. That's the torture I will suffer through. You're right. It is a big ask, but it's a big punishment I'm taking on. I will give you my report. I will talk about who's there in the theater. I will give it. And here's the thing: I'm not going to take Lady Lawgic. I'm going to sit there like a lonely loser in the theater watching Snow White by myself. Okay. I'm not going to make her suffer through that. No. I'm going to sit there by myself. I'm risking it. I'm risking it. $500. There you go. I'll do my math at the end of the show. I'm gonna make that my banner. Let's change my banner here. $500. Segments. There you go. We'll try it out. We'll see how that works. We'll see what that does. Here's money so you don't go see Snow White. I had to stop super checking out force Joe to see the movie. Republicans used to travel well, however, we're losing the old vote due to fear mongering on Social Security and Medicare cuts with Doge. It's the stupidest thing. It's like that's the one thing they're always screaming. They're cutting Medicare. They're cutting Medicare. It's the dumbest thing in the world. MLS, my brother making law simple. Joe is my hero for all the right reasons. God bless you, brother. God bless you. Thank you so very, very much. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Okay. Good luck at Snow White. Oh, my God. I knew that was going to happen. Damn, I should have said 1,000. All right. Can I come record you watching Snow White? I was thinking I would share it. I would share a locals of it. Like a locals, I'll film myself watching Snow White. Like I'll probably do a locals of me watching Snow White. That's probably what I'm gonna do. Yeah, that's the people just watching my face of like me watching Snow White. Yeah, that's probably what I'm gonna do. Oh God. All right, what do I have next? Zion says, I'm glad to see Lawgic found your glass, Joe. I hope she does it before the next time. It's hard to watch you squint through one. Yeah. If you missed this morning, and I apologize that I didn't start my stream up for the afternoon show, but I wasn't finding anyone who had any live action developments of like jury coverage in the Karen Reed trial. So I did not have my glasses this morning, and I felt so out of sorts. I ended up finding it myself, but yeah, I found it myself, but it wasn't until like 3:00 that I found them. So, yeah. Piano Dean saying, breaking news, Nickelback pre-side releases 80 Metals group Tesla, now world's most hated band. That is funny. Was that, are they the ones that saying there's a hole in my heart that can only be filled by you? Tesla? Is that the band? Creepy old guy watching kids movie alone won't look I didn't even think about that. Oh my god. I didn't even think about that. Oh, I should totally made that 1,000. Might want to take someone you're mad at so you don't scare the parents. Oh my god. What an utter disaster. A film because Joe May called SW nap time. Snow White nap time. Yeah, no, I'll stay awake. I'll stay awake. I'll stay awake. Matt Governor, Sandy Brown Republicans are still doing what they've always done, nothing. They should be keeping Trump's pace with supportive legislation. Well, we're going to see that in just a moment, actually. I'm going to get over there as soon as we finish my election coverage, which I do need to get to the bad news. The bad news tonight. Let's look back at the bad news. Wisconsin results are not looking really good. What is the Florida turnout tracker? What is that? This is R plus 30. November, R plus 14. You see? Oh, look at this. November 5th, early turnout, R plus 25. April 1st, early turnout, R plus 9. Look at that. Look at that. Combined turnout was R plus 26 versus R plus 21. I told you, we do not travel well. We don't. That's in the 6th district. What about in the 1st district? So I guess the R plus 14 is saying you could. That's either a reflection on Trump or the difference between Petronas and Matt Gaetz. I don't really care what they say as far as a referendum on Trump because that's stupid. As I explained, Wisconsin spring election results. This is the part that's really scary. So a big election that if you're not online, you probably don't know how much people have been talking about this. We had the persistence, Scott Pressler going all around Wisconsin trying to help Brad Schimmel win this election. So the Brad Schimmel, who was backed by the state Republican Party to help liberals, he apparently has been defeated by Susan Crawford in their election, the campaign, and to sit on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And his loss and Crawford's win gives the liberals a 4-3 majority. You might say to yourself, okay, why does that matter to anyone outside the state of Wisconsin? It sucks for Wisconsinites, but why does that matter? The reason they say it's a big deal is because they're expecting, I assume there's an ongoing lawsuit which relates to the attempts by the Democrats to engage in redistricting of their different polling areas in order to try and make it easier for Democrats to win. And the concern is that when they gerrymander their polling maps in a way that they'll be able to use artful redistricting and gerrymandering in order to help Democrats get an extra seat or two in in Congress, in the House, that they'll be able to play around with the map, which, to be fair, I've been screaming about how stupid it is as to how this has been allowed under law. And to be fair, both the right and the left engage in that gamesmanship of redistricting and trying to gerrymander. So now that the liberals hold a 4-3 majority in the state judiciary, the concern is that potentially as early as 2026, Wisconsin could end up having an extra one, or giving the Democrats an extra 1 or 2 members in the House. So that's the concern. That's why people are considering this a federal crisis, especially considering how significant, how close, how razor thin the lead is that the Republicans have in the House currently. So yeah, it's not a good thing. I'll tell you right now, when you're talking about 80% of the votes in, and he's trailing by almost 200,000 votes, I would say that this race is probably over. This race looks like it's over. So it is disappointing. It is frustrating. They actually had question 1 voter ID requirement. 86% of the votes in, voters will decide whether to amend the Wisconsin Constitution to require photo ID to vote. Wisconsin law already requires voters to show identification. A passage of this Republican-backed ballot question would make it harder for that requirement to be removed by the courts or legislature. What do you think? Do you think they got the voter ID? What do you think? They got the photo ID. It's not just, when they say Wisconsin law already requires voters to show identification, I don't know if that has to be a photo identification or not. This would be something that would be enshrined in Wisconsin. They have to have photo ID. And the answer to that question is 62% saying yes, let's maintain integrity in our elections. So that's a good sign. That's a good sign. Almost, it's near a 2-to-1 ratio. So that measure has passed. I don't know anything about the superintendent of public instruction. I don't know anything about that. So there you go. It looks as if Brad Schimmel lost, which is disappointing. It's very, very disappointing. If you're upset about it, you should be. It's very disappointing. Enjoy the movie. We're a long way from the 500, okay? A long way. Have fun watching Snowy White. You can't make me. You can't make me. All right. Let's talk about Andy Biggs. Andy Biggs and Judge Boasberg, because this is touching on a legal question. I had, I think, law of self-defense on probably around 2 weeks ago. And we were talking about Judge Boasberg, who's spent a lot of time in the news of late. And not simply Judge Boasberg, but many of these judges who are so willy-nilly signing off on one TRO after another designed to impact and the Donald Trump's executive orders and to rein him in from being able to accomplish anything, because it seems as if any executive order he writes, some judge is going to sign a TRO saying, no, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. And one of the most notorious ones is Chief Judge of the lower court in Washington, which is Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs has come along and he's filed a resolution. To remove King James Boasberg from office without requiring 2/3 of the Senate. That's right. Not impeachment, but removal. What are we talking about here? Well, we're going to look at his proposal here. But just so we can be clear about who Judge Boasberg is specifically, from the litany of judges who seem to have gone off the rails and saying, "Oh, I can stop I can enter a universal order. I'm fully authorized to go out there and protect this company's money." and tell him who he must hire and who he's allowed to fire and who he's not allowed to fire. And one crazy judge after another. One crazy judge after another who's just completely disregarded statutes and constitutional law, statutory and constitutional law, to say that they're now the new presidents of the United States on this particular issue, and completely disregarding the limitations of their lane under the Constitution. Judge Boasberg has gained some notoriety. He's the judge who signed off on a handful of things that have really aggravated people. The one that's currently pending is the TDA removals. He's the one who directed Trump to turn his military planes around and bring those 5 illegal aliens back to America, even though they were leaving out of Texas and he's in Washington, but somehow he felt that he has the authority to tell the President of the United States how to control his military planes and how to deal with international affairs. It was asinine, unbelievable, and frankly, very disturbing that a judge could even think for a moment that he has the possibility of having that power, that right and power. Well, we have here the proposal that was submitted by Mr. Andy Biggs of Arizona. HS resolution, the House of Representatives, Mr. Biggs of Arizona submitted the following resolution: removing James E. Boasberg, whose nickname is Jeb because of his initials, Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, for failure to remain in good behavior pursuant to Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution. Section 1, Article 3 of the Constitution. Let's pull up that precise language here. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the courts, as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Judges, both of Supreme and inferior court, shall hold their offices during good behavior. During good behavior. What does that mean, during good behavior? This language of during good behavior doesn't apply to the president. It doesn't apply to Congress. It only specifically applies to the judicial branch. That's the only place we see this language. And shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So, as Andy Biggs is saying, we're not seeing good behavior from Judge Boasberg. Resolved that James E. Boasberg, Chief Judge, United States District Court, District of Columbia, is removed for failing to maintain the standard of good behavior required of judges under Section 1, Article 3 of the Constitution. That following article of removal be exhibited to the United States Senate. Article removal exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and the people of the U.S. of A. against James E. Boasberg, Chief Judge, U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, in maintenance and support of its removal of him for failing to remain in good behavior. How so? Abuse of power. Chief Judge Boasberg, in violation of his oath of office. And by the way, it's not just that he directed him what to do with his planes. There was another thing related to money that he put in another TRO, I think, affecting Trump, and people had all sorts of questions. Like, how does this guy, Judge Boasberg, whose wife apparently is getting paid millions of dollars from one government agency or another, his daughter is getting millions of dollars from one government agency or another. This guy is a multimillionaire living off the teat of the government, and he's weighing in on universal orders issued by the president as to whether or not he has to keep paying out money. It sounds insane. It sounds corrupt. It does. It sounds really corrupt. Chief Judge Boasberg, in violation of his oath of office, did knowingly and willfully use his judicial position to knowingly interfere with the president's constitutional prerogatives and enforcement of the rule of law for political gain. The Constitution grants Congress the authority to create, eliminate, and regulate all federal courts inferior to the Supreme Court. Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution provides that the judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, thereby granting Congress the authority to remove a judge who fails to remain in good behavior while in office. I want to be clear here, just that we're all on the same page when we're going forward in this discussion. This is not an impeachment. An impeachment, you would need to get 2/3 of the Senate to go along with it, which everyone knows. If in the House, you need a simple majority. Sure, you might get a simple majority in the House, but in order to get a conviction of an impeachment, you need to have 2/3 of the Senate sign off, which means you would need 67 senators to sign off on it. There's only 53 Republicans, of which not all 53 are very reliable. It seems, and obviously, it's impossible. There's zero chance that you would pick up 14 Democrats to remove Boasberg. So impeachment is not a viable alternative for removing Judge Boasberg here, whether you can charge corruption or any other issues. Impeachment just doesn't seem viable. I literally think this guy could commit murder and the Democrats, like on video, and the Democrats would not impeach him because I think they love the fact that he's standing in Trump's way. And we see how it's not a matter of them actually having a policy. It's they have who they like and who they dislike, who's helping enrich them, who isn't, and that's who they're going to favor. They don't care about policies at all. You see that from the way people are reacting to the Tesla situation, right? I mean, we heard for years and years how the Earth is going to be spinning fireball of death from climate change, and we need EVs, and now they're drawing swastikas on those very same whiny lunatics who are out of their minds crazy about climate change are now defacing one electric vehicle after another simply because they don't like Elon, even though he doesn't even own many of these EVs that are being defaced. I don't think he owns any of them, but they're still coming after them. I guess the ones in the dealership, but the ones that are not a dealership, he doesn't even own them, and it's just like, let's deface them. What is wrong with you? And the point is, they don't believe in a policy. They don't believe in any of the crap they say. They really don't. They don't believe any of it. There's no consistency. There's no actual thought out plan as to like what's a way to make society a better place. It's a matter of, I don't like you and I'm going to be hurt on that. So the point I was getting at here is impeachment is a no-go if you're actually trying to do something productive rather than conduct a stage show. Yeah, sure. Congress can go out there and impeach all these different folks, and we know what's going to happen is the Senate is never, ever, 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 ever going to have any chance of convicting them, and it'll just be a pony show where it's like, I'm one of the good people, GOP. I'm one of the people who hates these judges, and I'm trying to get them removed, and fighting a cause that you know is a losing cause before you even draft the articles of impeachment. So that's a waste of time. But that's not what Andy Biggs of Arizona is doing here. He says, we're not going the impeachment route. No. We're looking at the Constitution, and where it says there that he can be removed for lack of good behavior, that's not impeachment. That's just removal. It's not that he's committing a crime. It's that we're removing him for bad behavior. And this is something that only a judge can be punished with, which is removal for bad behavior. What does it actually mean when we talk about removal for bad behavior? From a perspective of the law, what's the yardstick? How many? Is it a simple majority? Is it a simple majority in the Senate? Answer: nobody knows. Literally, nobody knows. Nobody knows, because it's not like something that's I don't know if that's ever happened before. Removal? Let me. I'll do a quick check here. I'm doing a quick check here. Has any judge ever been removed for bad behavior? Like, what's the process? Procedurally, what's going to happen here? Let me see if I pull that up for you. Let's Grok what he thinks. We're gonna find out from Grok. What is the legal procedure for removing a federal judge for bad behavior? Let's see what Grok thinks. United States federal judges. Oh my God. Oh, this is a Megillah. Oh, we got a whole Megillah here. No, not impeachment. What? No. No other mechanism like a recall election, executive action exists. Okay. So, no. So this is the question. Does the Constitution now thereby, by having that Article 3 issue, say they can remain there as long as they're in good behavior, is that creating a second avenue for removal outside of impeachment or not? That's what I'm saying. I don't think this has ever been tried before. I don't think anyone's ever tried this before. Does this mean shall hold their offices during good behavior? Does that mean there's impeachment and then there's this failure to have good behavior as a second way? Or is this itself a reference to the opening up the possibility that impeachment would apply to judges, and that for one reason or another we might think that impeachment does not apply to judges, and that this is opening up the doorway for there to be removal via impeachment? You understand the point? And we talk about impeaching folks. We talk about you might think to yourself, maybe impeachment only applies to Congress and the president. Maybe impeachment does not apply to judges. How do we know that impeachment applies to judges also? Because it says shall hold their offices during good behavior. Or you can say, no. Impeachment is obvious. You wouldn't need to have any extra language in the Constitution to tell us that judges can be impeached. And since we have this extra language in the Constitution, it must mean there's a different method of removing them. It must mean that there's a secondary approach, which is less than impeachment. We pull up so if you're going to say that if you want to argue that there's such a thing as a removal process outside the impeachment process, specifically for judges, you basically have to say that the impeachment clause does not apply to judges. And the only way that we know that they should apply, that doesn't innately apply to judges. But it says this good behavior section in Article 3. And now that, but without that Article 3 section, the impeachment clause itself would not automatically cover judges. I hope I'm being clear here, that you all understand what I'm trying to say. In other words, it could be that impeachment only applies to the president, vice president, members of Congress, doesn't apply to judges at all. Well, if you want to look at where they talk about impeachment, it does come up in Article 2 of the Constitution, which is really talking about the president and vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment. Let me pull that up here for you. Article. Article 2, Section 4 says the president, vice president, all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 2 here is talking about, obviously, the people who are listed expressly obviously can be impeached. Who are civil officers of the United States? Who's incorporated in that? Now, civil officers, you would think civil officers would automatically include judges. And if they already include judges, in that case, when we're looking at Article 3 here, when we're looking at Article 3 of the Constitution, this is extra language, which means that there's another way they can be removed for bad behavior outside of impeachment. But as we let's turn back for a moment to this resolution. We'll go forward and say, what is it that they're saying that Judge Boasberg has done that merits his removal for bad behavior? Where is his bad behavior? What was his bad behavior? So he's saying the Constitution grants Congress the authority to create, eliminate, and regulate all federal courts inferior to the Supreme Court. Section 1 of Article 3 provides judges both of Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior, thereby granting Congress the authority to remove a judge who fails to remain in good behavior while in office. Constitution grants the president broad and expansive powers over the conduct of foreign policy and to ensure national security against foreign threats. Supreme Court has ruled that the power to conduct foreign affairs is a political power which is largely beyond the scope of judicial inquiry or decision. As such, outside questions of the constitutionality of a provision or action, the Constitution places foreign policy decisions by the President and Congress beyond the scope of review by the courts. You have no business poking your stinking noses into any issues that have to do with national security or foreign threats. In 1798, Congress passed the Alien Enemies Act, which authorizes the president to make a public proclamation designating members of a foreign nation or government liable for apprehension and removal as alien enemies of the United States. The act gives the president sole authority to determine the manner of the enemy aliens' restraint and removal, as well as to establish any regulations which are necessary to ensure public safety. On March 15, 2025, President Donald J. Trump issued a proclamation declaring that all Venezuelan citizens who are members of the organization known as Tren de Aragua, which Pisco told me how to pronounce that, Tren de Aragua, are liable to be apprehended and removed under the Alien Enemies Act due to the threat of organization that the organization poses in the United States and its clear entanglement of the government of Venezuela. Furthermore, due to the severity of Tren de Aragua's crimes against the United States, the president declared that members of Tren de Aragua are ineligible for benefits of Section 22 of the Act and are therefore liable to immediate apprehension and removal. Pursuant to this declaration, the president directed the Attorney General, Secretary of Homeland Security, to immediately take steps necessary to begin the apprehension and removal of members of Tren de Aragua who are presently within the United States. Despite the broad authority given by the Constitution to the president and then confirmed by statute when conducting matters of foreign affairs and national security and the clear authority given to the president under the Alien Enemies Act, James E. Boasberg knowingly interfered with the president's execution of foreign policy by ordering the return of members of a designated foreign terrorist organization to the United States. To justify his action, Boasberg cited questions concerning the interpretation of certain words and phrases which are intimately tied to the president's foreign policy powers and therefore beyond the scope of review of the courts. In doing so, James E. Boasberg knowingly extended beyond the bounds of power of his office and unjustly interfered in the execution of foreign policy and national security for partisan purposes of halting the implementation of the president's foreign policy and for political gain. Furthermore, James Boasberg has failed to disclose payments received from non-federal sources and abused his discretion during his term on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Accordingly, under the Good Behavior Clause of Section 1, Article 3, these actions of James E. Boasberg constitute misbehavior, rendering him liable for removal from office. Wherefore, James E. Boasberg, by his conduct, has failed to remain in good behavior, shall be removed from office, no longer be considered a judge of the United States. Very well done, Representative Andy Biggs. Nicely played. Nicely played, I say. Now, question. Is Andy Biggs correct in his read here? Is he correct in his read? Let's assume we can get the majority in the House to vote to remove James Boasberg. And let's assume, furthermore, for the purposes of conversation, And we managed to get 53, or at the very least, 51 senators to say, afuera, afuera. Go join Tren de Aragua, wherever the hell they are. We're done with you. Let's assume that such a thing were to come to pass, which is far from a given. But I would say it's at least 50-50 that it does happen. It's at least 50-50. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I would not be at all surprised if it did. So let's assume that we get this vote and this bill passes, and the bill very clearly says he's removed. Adios. What can we envision is going to happen next? The next step is he will certainly go to the court and say, hey, I want to stay on this order. This order is unconstitutional. We can be positive that his friends, whoever is assigned to handle this case, who's currently beneath him because he's the chief of the district court, is certainly going to grant him his stay and say it's unconstitutional and grant him his stay. We can anticipate that, so he's not going to be removed from his position at that point for even a day. When that stay is granted, we can just play out how this whole thing is likely to go. So the next step that's going to happen is it'll go to the D.C. Circuit Court. And I would be shocked beyond belief if the D.C. Circuit Court. So now this is what we're picturing a series of events. And none of these are far-fetched at all. In fact, one can fairly argue this is, given the political climate, the most likely sequence of events today. Now, this train, the path of the train that I'm giving here could go off the tracks at any given point in the story. But you have a majority in the House, so you would think you should be able to get the House to pass this bill. You have a majority in the Senate, and they're going to say, you would think, we don't need to have 67 senators or even 60 senators. We just need to have a majority to pass this thing, assuming that the Senate comes to the decision that we need a simple majority, which the Senate operates by its own rules. The Senate, in theory, could say that we're going to have this fulfill the regular filibuster requirement and only pass this if we get 60 senators, in which case this is DOA at that point in time, because you're not going to get 7 Democrats to join on, even if you can manage to convince 53 queasy, squishy Republicans in the Senate to sign off on this, of which, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins are the squishiest of them all. To say that they're going to jump on board and help you flesh out 60 senators is kind of that's, I would say, is less likely. I would think they're more likely to be a no than a yes. But in theory, you should be able to get 51 on. And if the Senate, which controls its own rules, says, hey, for removal, you only need 50, assuming they come to that decision, now, in theory, this bill would pass. And let's assume that Trump would sign it, which we know he would, because he's been calling for Boasberg's impeachment. So if this bill was presented to Donald Trump, it would pass. So the idea of this piece of legislation removing Boasberg coming to pass seems to be at the very least 50-50, if not more likely rather than less likely, like maybe 55-45, that this will actually happen. Okay. Then we can be positive Judge Boasberg is going to sue the United States of America and Trump and basically say, you can't remove me because it's unconstitutional, and removal here has to be done by impeachment, not by some sort of made-up removal process that the GOP, led by Andy Biggs, just came up with 10 minutes ago. And who is going to bring that case before? He's going to bring it in the D.C. Circuit Court, which means it wouldn't be assigned to him, likely. It would be assigned to anyone but him, but it wouldn't matter because whoever it's assigned to is currently his underling, because he's the chief of the district court of D.C. So that underling is almost certainly going to say, yeah, when presented with a potential TRO of, let's put a stay on this legislation until this whole thing is sorted out, meaning let's keep Judge Boasberg in his position until this whole thing is sorted out, I can promise you that the D.C. Circuit Court will grant a stay on this order taking effect and say, Judge Boasberg, you can remain in your position. This legislation is temporarily stayed until this case is resolved. At that point in time, we should anticipate that the United States of America, the government, will say, okay, let's appeal to the Circuit Court of District of Columbia. When they do that, we can you can be very, very positive that the D.C. Circuit Court is likely to say, we're affirming the lower court's stay and go do your case and come to your decision. At which point, the United States would likely then go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can say, we're taking this case. We're not taking this case. They can make a decision. They don't have to take the case. They likely would politically say, we're not taking this case. There's a really good chance that Chief Justice John Roberts will say, it stayed. Let's let this thing play out. We're not going to take this case. Let's see what the lower courts do. And that Judge Boasberg will remain in his position while that case sort of winds its way until it reaches a final conclusion. And I can guarantee you the final conclusion that the D.C. Circuit is going to come out with ultimately is there's no such thing as removal. There's no such thing as removal. And if it were to work its way to the Supreme Court, which it could, it would be an issue of first impression before the Supreme Court, and it would be a question of interpreting this essential piece of the Constitution, which has been in our Constitution since its initial drafting. And I'll tell you that if the Supreme Court were to review this, I think that Andy Biggs and the GOP in the United States would certainly lose. That does not mean I think that they should lose. I think that philosophically they should win. I think philosophically it's the correct call to say this has to be an alternative to impeachment. I think politically they will lose. And because of that, there is justifiable basis, legal basis. It's not hard to find justifiable legal basis to say, no. That language of good behavior is what tells us that judges are part of the category of people who can be impeached. And when they say civil officers in Article 2, that's talking about civil officers who are governed by Article 2. But judges are not governed by Article 2. They're governed by Article 3. And accordingly, if we didn't say anything about good behavior, some folks might think it's impossible to ever impeach a judge. Good behavior is coming in there to tell us that they can be impeached, but then you need to go through the normal impeachment process of House and Senate. Here's the flaw in that perspective that I expect SCOTUS to say. The flaw in that perspective is removal for good behavior doesn't even use the word impeach. Why would you say that it's got to follow the exact same process? Why would anyone think that if they wanted to say it can be impeached, they could have just said can be impeached, could have said judges can be impeached. As a textualist, meaning reading the text of the Constitution, it seems asinine and insane to me to say that we're going to use a language of impeachment for persons who have Article 2 powers, and we're going to use a completely different language of good behavior, removal will retain their position during times of good behavior for the judiciary. To say that it's supposed to follow the exact same process, and yet for one reason they chose not to use completely different language, seems like an asinine read of the Constitution. So philosophically and principally, I think that it's an argument of bad faith to say that it's a standardized impeachment for judges, and they just decided to word it this way. That seems insane. It seems like a bad faith read. But I expect that Chief Justice Roberts, if this case is ever accepted by the Supreme Court and push comes to shove and has to make a decision on this, and Amy Coney Barrett will fall in line, and maybe even Kavanaugh and Gorsuch will fall in line in reaching this conclusion for two reasons. Number one, when Trump threw out the idea of impeaching Judge Boasberg publicly, Chief Roberts came out of the shadows to make a statement basically blasting it as hard as the Supreme Court justice is going to blast anything, saying, we don't talk about impeachments for decisions you don't like. The proper process is to appeal it. Which means he doesn't want to see removal because you don't like decisions because someone issues decisions you dislike. And that is the institutionalist. I can guarantee you it will be at least 6-3 against Biggs and the government if this goes all the way through the Supreme Court, because the institutionalists are going to look at this as an attack on the judiciary, and they're going to look at it as their own. They would be putting their own necks in a noose, because if removal for bad behavior could be because of some claims that one side of the political aisle can say about you, if such a thing were available, think this through for a second. You think this wouldn't have happened to Clarence Thomas at some point? They would have said some claims about him, like, oh, he had some donor who gave him an RV or something. And so if they can remove with a simple majority of the Senate, they're going to look at it as they're putting their own necks in a noose, and especially given the political turmoil and the strong divisiveness that we have between blue and red today, that we're just going to see one removal after another. Anytime someone issues a decision they don't like, there's going to be a removal. If you have a House and Senate which are united in their political constitution, meaning if both are Republican, both are Democrat, they're just going to start removing judges. And I think, and that those judges could be at the district court level, could be at the circuit court level, and could be at the Supreme Court level. So I think they're going to look at it as it's I think their survival instincts will kick in, and I think they're going to basically cross out that section of the Constitution. That even though the Constitution, philosophically and principally and textually, makes it pretty clear that there's not supposed to be the standardized impeachment process, I think that if this ever makes it and is accepted by the Supreme Court is going to reject this direction for the purpose of trying to save their own necks. They won't look at it that way. In their heart of hearts and in their minds, they won't say we're saving our own necks, because people don't like looking at their own failings. They won't want to admit it to themselves that their actions are dictated by their instinct for survival. The way they will phrase it, if they ever admit it at all, is, well, if we didn't come to this decision, we would just have political chaos, that there'd be tons of judges being removed every time they issue a decision that someone doesn't like, that the political party in power doesn't like. They're just going to be removed. How can you possibly issue decisions if you're under threat that even if you issue a perfectly awesome decision, but it's disappointing the political party that happens to be in power, you're going to be removed for issuing a proper decision? So for that basis, they're going to say the institution of preserving the judiciary mandates that we read the Constitution, that removal that would occupy their office during times of good behavior means you can impeach them, but you still got to get 67 senators. That's how I'm explaining to you. I hope you all now understand my position as to what I'm expecting to happen politically, the different arguments pro and for this move that Andy Biggs is making legally, and then pragmatically what we should anticipate happening once this entire situation, once the dust has settled. Does that mean, since I'm telling you that ultimately I don't think James Boasberg will spend one single day removed from his position, because I think that TRO are going to affect the day that this legislation gets passed, if it gets passed, and protect him from being removed, and that all the way through up to the Supreme Court, even if the Supreme Court takes it, they are never going to say he has to step down. And the Supreme Court ultimately will side with Boasberg, either for their own self-preservation or to preserve the institution of the judiciary from being politically attacked. And accordingly, you might think I'm saying Andy Biggs is wasting our time with this, that ultimately it's not going to prevail. And you would be mistaken on that, because I think that it's better to have this removal process tested on some woke, insane, stupid, crazy lefty judge than having this removal process tested on a Clarence Thomas or on a Judge Alito or Judge Terry Doughty in Louisiana, who called the Biden administration the worst violators of First Amendment, of free speech, First Amendment rights in American history. So it's much better to have this tested on James Boasberg and then have the Supreme Court come out and say, no, there's no such thing as removal process, when it's being tested with some lefty lunatic's neck in the noose rather than some really based judge's neck in the noose. And then once the Supreme Court says there's no removal process aside from impeachment alone for judges, that will help protect the judges on the right from ever facing this in the future. So I think it's the same way I was talking about testing the pardon power it's in Trump's benefit. I think testing the removal power is in doing it now. It's always best to know what's available, what's not, and have a Supreme Court weigh in on that. So that's my thoughts on that. Yeah, the cheeseheads failed. Seen Newt Gingrich and others testify by the House Judiciary today regarding judicial overreach. It's a 5-hour slog, but you can fast forward through tons of bloviators and one wingnut professor from Penn U. ChatGPT says judicial conference can impose punishment short of removal, but including retirement after an investigation. Look, maybe they'll tell us something else that you can do. Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 65C for TRO bond. I've talked about that specific statute. The government has tried. They're called injunction bonds. I've literally litigated this, and I told over the whole story about how I litigated in federal court about an injunction bond. I'm trying to get a sizable injunction bond, and I think that they're willfully flouting the FRCP in not directing and mandating a sufficient injunction bond. I'd be asked Rock to look up the charges and articles of impeachment against Supreme Court Justice Chase. If you want to tell me you're going to go through the impeachment, the point is not the legitimacy of these charges. The point that I was getting at is the legitimacy of the process ultimately being respected by the Supreme Court. And I don't think the Supreme Court is ultimately going to accept it as being legitimate because of their own interest in survival. So that's my point. What I'm saying is the basis of the charges, whether it's sufficient or not, it could be that I'll look that up and I'll see that Sam Chase. I'll do a quick look. What were basis of charges brought against Chief Justice Chase? House Representatives impeached Chase on March 12, 1804, with 8 articles of impeachment, primarily driven by his partisan behavior as a staunch Federalist during a time of intense political rivalry with Jeffersonian Republicans. The charges stem from his actions as trial judge in lower circuit courts that they didn't like his decisions. So, good history lesson. Thank you, Aaron. And we see that all those charges came because they didn't like his decisions as being too politically partisan. If framers meant impeachment was the same as good behavior removal, why use new term constitution? Why not just call it impeachment? I think you wrote that before I was expressing that. Yeah. We need non-SCOTUS that make Clarence Thomas look moderate. That would be nice. That would be nice. Hey, Joe, have you looked at Ginsburg's opinion about decisions made by circuit district that are so sweeping in their impact? Her opinion is one that was not consistent with the judge in question. Do you have a specific one? You can DM me if you have a specific one you want me to check out. Opinion from her. What about branch reorganization, eliminating the D.C. circuit? Congress could do that. Congress could do that. That would be awesome. I don't understand why they have their own circuit. It's crazy. Before removal, Congress has to pass law establishing removal process. Maybe. Maybe. And maybe the Supreme Court will say that. Next fight, Congress establishes all lower courts. Just a report that the injunctions against Trump are invalid due to RCP 65C violations. Because Judge failed to enforce RCP 65C, why can't he be removed through disbarment? He wouldn't be removed. A judicial decision is not going to be a basis for disbarment. It's a good question, Frankie. But they wouldn't disbar a judge for his decisions. They would say the proper procedure is to appeal it. We've talked about this 65C over and over again. Is there some new story in the news that I'm missing specifically about that? Now I have a couple of you who raised this federal rules civil procedure 65C. I brought this up when the thought was passed by my eyes on X at least a month ago, if not 6 weeks ago, that Trump's attack on all these TROs should be that they have to pony up the billions of dollars as a bond under the law, under Rule 65C. So that works more for the financial ones than it does for the TDA Alien Enemies Act thing. But so that's what I anticipate is going to happen there. I should look at my ghetto. Let me glance in the ghetto and with my diggers. Doc Fast says, since lawyers can't do math, that's just we $1 rant Joe to his goal of $500. Prove to the ghetto you can. This is from Janek 909. I owed her $1,000, but she agreed to a 1% settlement only if I give it to you. She really wants you to see Snow White. Zellian says, Joe, I think Massey and Newt made a good point about the nationwide injunctions. All right, I'll pull this up. It's 6 minutes long. I think it's worthwhile. I think it's probably worthwhile. Because I've been ranting about these nationwide. I was on Tim Pool ranting about nationwide injunctions. How about just to fund the entire DC circuit? Actually, in the Constitution, you have to pay judges. They shall be paid. You can't defund them. They have to be paid. Sadly. Constitution expressly says they got to be paid. All right. The issue of nationwide injunctions is a double-edged sword.
Chairman, this hearing reminds me of a breakfast I had with Antonin Scalia. About a dozen of us congressmen invited him to breakfast, and this was about a decade ago when Obama was the president and John Boehner was the speaker. And my colleagues appealed to Scalia and said, what can you do? You need to get involved here. The courts need to get involved. Obama's running roughshod over Congress. And Scalia refused to accept that premise. He said, no, this is not my job to referee fights between your two branches. My job is as a jurist to decide if somebody's been harmed and what the remedy is. And occasionally we interpret the law and the constitutionality of it. He said, and by the way, you're the most powerful branch of government. I don't know what you're complaining about. All the tools you need to restore the balance are in the Constitution. And one of my colleagues protested that impeachment was just too hard to pull off, given the threshold in the Senate and the political backlash. And Scalia shook his head. He said, I'm not talking about impeachment. You'll have the power of the purse. You are funding everything you complain about that Obama is doing. Just quit funding it. And it was a pretty clear message. Now, that was about tension between Congress and the executive branch, and our hearing today is about tension between the judicial system and the executive branch. But I think it's still the case that what Scalia said is true. Let me give you an example of something I'm going to predict is going to happen in the courts soon that I'm not going to have much sympathy for on the president. So the president recently had a press conference and said he's going to wind down the Department of Education. Oh, great. That's my bill. I've got a one-sentence bill that eliminates the Department of Education. I should be very excited about this. The problem is much of the activity that he says he will undertake, he just signed into law the funding of it a week before. We did a continuing resolution that fully funds every single penny of the Department of Education then a week, and the president signed it. This is, as Professor Shaw pointed out, appropriations bills are laws too, and they require both chambers and then the president to sign it. And so it's an appropriation bill, it's a law, it's in law, and a week later, he announces that he doesn't like some of the law, and so he's going to do things differently. So that's my problem that I have. Now, I do think it's a good hearing, and this is a great question. I tend to think that probably there are cases where they shouldn't have nationwide injunctions, but this is a double-edged sword. Under the Biden administration, he did unconstitutional and unlawful things during COVID that were stopped with nationwide injunctions. So for instance, he had a rent moratorium that was stopped until the Supreme Court eventually basically said it was illegal. He refused to grant religious exemptions to the vaccines in the military. There was a nationwide injunction. Actually, one of the attorneys in that is a constituent of mine, Chris Wiest, who stopped all of the vaccine mandates at that point in the Air Force. That was a nationwide injunction. And then his OSHA vaccine mandate was stopped with a nationwide injunction. So I'm torn on this. Maybe if we just don't have nationwide injunctions, people in certain districts can live under tyranny or the perception of it. And if you're in a different judicial district or circuit, you get some remedy from the tyranny.
The fact that Thomas Massie doesn't like the possibility that there will be distinguishing results, different results in different locations in the country, that doesn't make that any more constitutional. Under the Constitution, that's what's supposed to happen. You don't have the authority. So it's got to be brought in each jurisdiction. Certainly, in each state, it has to be brought. If they don't have the authority to act, they don't have the authority to act, even if it's something I like. Now, you could make a distinction when we're talking about nationwide injunctions. I can try to split the baby here a little bit. That when it's something that's genuinely affecting someone's life and liberty, that's something where nationwide injunctions make more sense, as opposed like being forced to take medicines that to keep your job. that is something that I can understand now, that has a constitutional type of ring to it, more so than if it's just our business is going to close if we don't get injunctive relief, where that's a financial thing and they're not supposed to be any injunctions at all. So, yeah. The fact that he might not like the result doesn't make it, well, Thomas Massey and maybe millions of people don't like the result. That doesn't change what the Constitution, what powers the Constitution gives a district court judge. It doesn't have any impact on that, even if you don't like the result.
Maybe it works out better that way. Maybe we should have tried each of these cases in each of these courts and found out the answer. But Mr. Speaker, former Speaker Newt Gingrich, what do you have to say on since you were Speaker and led this appropriations process, do you think the president can unwind the Department of Education a week after he signed the bill that funded it?
Well, as you know, when I was Speaker, we balanced the budget, something you believe in, for 4 straight years, the only time in the last century. So I think I can talk with some authority about this. I suspect there will be a real fight at the Supreme Court level over whether or not the president has impoundment authority, which was taken away during the collapse of the Nixon presidency, but had existed before that. That'll be a legal fight. I think your point about injunctions is semi-right. That is, a court should be able to issue the injunction. My point about this, the Chief Justice, is if that particular single district judge says, this is a valid injunction, if they immediately went to the Supreme Court and then the Supreme Court agreed that it was a valid injunction, then you could have a nationwide injunction. But I'm with Lincoln, who said even though the court had decided 7-2 that slavery could be extended nationally, he refused to accept the legitimacy of that decision because it wasn't unanimous. Now, so the precedent is pretty clear. I think your instinct is right. There are times you need a nationwide action. My only point is, if the district judge says that, the following morning it should be in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court should have to render judgment. If they agree, then you have a nationwide injunction. But if they say, no, you're in error, then there's no nationwide injunction.
Makes sense to me. I yield back.
That's a very interesting policy. It's not anywhere by statute. Perhaps Congress could pass a statute making sure that a nationwide injunction would be would go straight to the Supreme Court the next day. That's an interesting suggestion. You can, in theory, Congress in theory could pass a law saying that if there is a nationwide injunction, it has to go to the Supreme Court immediately the next day in order to, take effect. And that would be a way of doing it. You know what I have for tonight's goal? Lady Lawgic just came in. You know what I have for tonight's goal? That if I get $500 cumulatively, I'm going to Snow White by myself. I was like, I'm not going to put Lady Lawgic through that. I'm just going to sit there. Someone pointed out how creepy that would be. Well, I figure you're very busy. It's right before Passover. So I figure I probably end up having to go on Sunday. So you're probably not going to have time to sit for 2 hours. I'd love to have you come with me. But I did offer that. What? Oh, okay. I'll probably have to film it. I'll probably have to share it on Locals. I'm doing it. So, no funny business.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, anyway, I think that this idea that Newt Gingrich is suggesting actually has some good sense behind it. That makes it incumbent upon Congress to demand that that's what has to happen to a nationwide injunction, that it gets verified, so to speak, by the Supreme Court within a very short time frame thereafter. I happen to like that suggestion a lot. If the LC are estimated by Congress and the lower courts are established by Congress, the Supreme Court is established by Constitution, wouldn't the removal processes be different? Maybe. Impeachment being the way to remove a Supreme Court judge and behavior impeachment for the lower courts. meaning that Supreme Court can only be removed for impeachment and lower courts can be removed for. Yeah, but there's some logic to that. The counter argument, the legal and philosophical counter argument to that would be it's all listed in the same, the ability to, the good behavior language is used for both, in reference to both lower court and Supreme Court. So drawing that distinction isn't easily read into Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution. Reading that distinction between the lower court and the Supreme Court. But that's a nice way that King Ginger here is trying to split the baby, which is really interesting that that's King Ginger doing that, because King David was notoriously a ginger. He was a redhead, and his son was King Solomon, who's famous for the decision of splitting the baby. And here's King Ginger 333 coming out, and he's saying, "Split the baby." You have to pay judges, but not staff, courthouse, or given jurisdiction. That's true. That's true. That's true. If we get a 1K, do we get funny business? No. I'm not turning my channel into an OnlyFans here. Sorry. That's funny. That's pretty funny. That was pretty funny. Dominion After Dark raided the stream. You're very late, Dominion After Dark. I appreciate the raid, but my God, I gotta sit here holding my breath waiting for that raid. But thank you, brother. Appreciate that. All right. Tomorrow is Liberation Day. It's actually today. It's 12:07 on the East Coast. Today is Liberation Day. Happy Liberation Day. I wish I had one of those party favors. Happy Liberation Day. Happy Liberation Day. La Liberación del Americano. Only tariffs. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about Liberation Day and what it means. Here's one guy weighing in on Liberation Day. He's like, look, let me give you my perspective on tariffs. And I've been telling you all that tariffs are a good thing, but there's a certain caveat when I'm telling you tariffs are a good thing. Who's this guy? What's this guy's name? Gerald Salente. I think he's a guy. 200,000 followers. Master trend forecaster. Here's his take on tariffs.
Because tomorrow's Liberation Day. Dun, da, da, da. What's Trump going to do with the tariffs? How low will they go? How high will they be? Who knows? We'll see, because the game keeps changing. And again, I know people hate me for saying I agree with tariffs. They don't hear the other part. I agree with tariffs if you do away with income tax. Because when we had tariffs,
Oh, so he's okay with tariffs as long as there ain't no freaking income tax.
didn't have income tax. And I also I don't believe in globalization. I believe in self-sustaining economies. Again, the facts are all there. When they put the sanctions on Russia and that scumbag piece of shit that disappeared, who knows where he is, Biden, Putin's going to pay the price. We said, no, they're not. So Russia has all they need to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient. They have the human and natural resources. And all those companies that flooded out of Russia, the Russians took it over. Same thing with China, more self-sustaining, more self-sufficient. They got 1.4 billion people. They do business and build and trade with each other. You don't have to bring in outside products. You build your own economy. So I believe in that. So take it easy. If you don't believe in it, fine. But don't give me your fucking shit, shove it up your ass, all right? Because tomorrow...
I didn't expect that ending there. I didn't expect that ending there. Joy writes, Mrs. Profate says, money for Snow White movie. Can't wait for your review. Love your show. Thank you so much, Joy. I appreciate that. Allegan News saying, got Lady Lawgic laughing aloud. I was glad it was taken as a joke. Of course, taken as a joke. Let me check over in, look at my diggers. They're talking about buying phones. Of course. Totally fits with the entire nature of the conversation we're having here. Do tell. Tell us about what kind of phones you're all getting. This is what we need to know. We need to know that's what's happening over here in Diggerland. They're talking about the phones. Trigger of Oz. Liberation Day is the day that Trump is calling April 2nd because that is the day that we are starting to impose tariffs, matching tariffs on every country that tariffs us. Wherever you tariff us, we're going to tariff you. And maybe the tariffs will be more. Who really knows? Tariffs are here. That's what Liberation Day is. You'd say to yourself, why is that called Liberation Day? And the reason I think he's calling it Liberation Day is because he said if we start mirroring their tariffs, they're going to stop tariffing us and we'll be able to have better trade relations, fairer trade relations internationally. So, congratulations on your new phones. And so that's what Liberation Day is. Liberation Day is a day where we're imposing tariffs on the entire world in expectation of Liberation Day. In preparation of Liberation Day, it's already had its impact. There's already been a country which has come out and said, oh, we're done with giving you tariffs, no more tariffs for you. And that is actually the state of Israel has said, no more tariffs on America. We're done tariffing them. So now Israelis can buy American products without having any tariffs imposed on them going forward. And they are trying to basically evade getting tariffed. Now maybe it's just clever Israelis realizing, wait a second, if everyone else gets tariffed and we don't, that's a pretty good deal. That's a pretty good deal. And when that happens, because they've caved, and other nations like Canada and the entire EU say, no, we will keep tariffing the Americans, that all of a sudden, when Israel starts increasing its trade over here and supplementing deficiencies that are going to be in our industry over here, because and basically able to have healthier trade with America, I can tell you right now, you're going to be hearing even more screaming about the Jews. They outplayed us. They outfact those clever Jews. It's going to be everywhere. Oh my God, I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. But all they're doing is basically saying, oh, okay, this is what Trump wants, no tariffs. All right, we'll give you no tariffs. We won't tariff you. You won't tariff us. We're good. But yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about it. There's an article here from Breitbart News breaking down Liberation Day that I want to share with you all. So let's check it out. Breitbart reporting Liberation Day and the end of the world's trade war against America, because they have been butchering us, and we haven't even been putting up a fight. Donald Trump's first president to put up a fight against the fact that we've been tariffed up and down. President Trump is set to step into the Rose Garden tomorrow for what may be the most consequential economic announcement of his second term. Markets are bracing, diplomats are dialing, pundits are speculating wildly, but no one, not Wall Street, not foreign governments, not even some inside the West Wing, seem to know exactly what will be announced. This, as it turns out, is part of the design. It's the looming threat that you don't know what's coming. No, France, you don't know what's coming. Greece, sorry, Bulgaria, sorry, the Germans, who have been taxing our cars at rates as high as, 10%, 20%, basically making it so ridiculously prohibitive that nobody in the EU owns an American car. Trump has dubbed it Liberation Day, a piece of branding with more substance than cynicism. For weeks, he signed that a sweeping new tariff regime is coming. 20% across the board, a reciprocal system that mirrors foreign rates, something hybrid and more complex. The ambiguity is not a bug, it's leverage. It's designed to scare the bejesus out of them. Because for all they know, Liberation Day comes, and he's going to be like, okay, whatever tariffs you've been hitting us with, we're doubling it. There you go. Have a nice day. He might do that. No one knows. As a Bloomberg columnist put it in the moment of unguarded awe, quote, I can't recall the last time when some people around the world were waiting for a White House announcement where no one seems to know what exactly is going to be announced. This is not chaos, it's choreography. And I agree with who's the author here? This author seems beast. We got an author? John Carney. Not that John Carney. That's not chaos, it's choreography. Trump, the eternal showman, has once again turned policy into prime time. This is part salesman's instinct, part negotiator's tactic, and wholly consistent with the idea of America reclaiming its role as the agenda setter in global trade. Yes, indeed. Scaring the heck out of them. That's what you want in your leader. What the hell is wrong with these stupid Democrats that can't even recognize when he's helping bail out their stupid, pathetic economic policies? While the legacy press fixates on who in the White House prefers which plan, the more important story has already been written in the U.S. Trade Representative's report in the history of America's failed trade battles and a decade of structural disadvantages quietly accepted by successive administrations. The economic case for Liberation Day is, in fact, stunningly straightforward. Consider Europe's VAT regime. VAT. A German automaker exporting a car to the U.S. does so tax-free thanks to a VAT rebate. An American automaker shipping a car to Europe pays embedded U.S. taxes and a European VAT upon entry. One enjoys de facto export subsidy because they can send it out and not have to pay VAT. They're basically sending it out without having to pay taxes. The other faces a tax wall. The World Trade Organization, in its infinite wisdom, allows this disparity and has repeatedly blocked American attempts to address it through legal or tax code innovations. The Foreign Sales Corporation regime, illegal. Domestic international sales corporations, illegal. Export tax incentives, illegal. Tariffs, it turns out, are the only instrument left that isn't prohibited by the rules of a game designed for America to lose. A tariff of 25% on European goods, as some advisors have suggested, would not be punitive. It would be compensatory. It's a way to balance the playing field. It would account for the embedded tax burden American producers face, neutralize Europe's VAT advantage, and most importantly, do what every past effort has failed to do. Signal that the playing field is about to tilt back toward the American worker. Wholly agree. And to the extent that we end up being forced to adjust, that we can't afford to import foreign goods anymore, that it's not cost efficient, the price of goods might go up a little bit, that's a short-term pain we're all dealing with. I'll remind you of what J.D. Vance said about Liberation Day. Don't sit there in judgment about the economy and the effectiveness and propriety of Liberation Day on April 10th or April 15th. Come back June 30th. Come back after 3 months. Let's see how it works after 3 months. Because I think what you'll see the American industry has to forcibly get kicked into high gear. Because if all of a sudden now you're able to compete with these European imports that we're getting here and do it more cost effectively, it'll improve jobs here. It'll help make us more self-sustaining. Or God forbid, if we're dealing with another pandemic type of situation, we're not as reliant on the Chinas of the world. It's a good thing. I think it's potentially a very good thing. I hope. The old orthodoxy is dead. The idea that tariffs are inherently self-defeating relies on century-old orthodoxy that has not aged well. Critics invoke Smoot-Hawley like a mantra, ignoring the fact that America's great industrial expansion occurred under a high tariff regime, and that the Great Depression had far more to do with monetary collapse than border taxes. Meanwhile, what passes for free trade, what we call free trade today, is anything but that. We pretend we have free trade, but we don't actually have free trade. Global commerce is dominated by managed currencies, state-backed subsidies, and vast networks of non-tariff barriers, all working to suppress U.S. production and inflate foreign leverage. John Michelson, writer in the Wall Street Journal, made the national security case, quote, a deindustrialized America cannot sustain military primacy, much less economic independence. But he also made the business case. For investment to flow into factories, supply chains, and workforce development companies need stable price signals. Tariffs provide them. And unlike central planning, they require no bureaucracy to administer. They function like a carbon tax on mercantilism, except that they encourage employment, not austerity. What does this mean? Because I know that this is a lot of highfalutin words in here. So what the point that John Michelson is making here is, you know how you have like a carbon tax that it's like, oh, okay, if you're having this many emissions, we're going to hit you with certain prices for that to sort of make it less cost effective for you to do that. So too, when we talk about a tax on mercantilism, on your use of industry, that you're going to be reliant and force you to be more reliant on American industry. That if you're dealing on foreign industry, it's going to cost you more. So just because you have cheaper labor, perhaps in Mexico, or cheaper labor in China, where they don't have the same standards, operating standards that we have here for employees. So now it's crushing the American worker. Because basically, if you can basically do the work much more cheaply, and then sell it here, bring it here to market much more cheaply because you had much cheaper labor, you're not going to be producing it here in America. And that's the way they deal with us, where it's like, oh, okay, we produce it here, and then they charge tax if you want to buy an American product. So we're in a very unequal trade balance. And by putting this tariff on them, putting a tariff back on them, one of two things happens. Either they strip away their tariffs so our trade improves, or we have an increased growth of our own industry domestically. Because people are like, well, it's not, it used to be, it was really cost effective for me to produce this in India. It's no longer the case. Because when I bring it across the border back into America, it's going to get hit with this tax, this tariff. So if it was 10% cheaper on the labor costs for me to be doing this in producing it in India, but I got to pay 15% to get it back in here, that's a net loss. I might as well produce it here and it'll be cheaper. So that's the thought process. But in the short term, I'll tell you right now, we should anticipate in the short term, prices are just going to go up. Because what's going to end up happening, and I say short term, I mean for the next probably 2 to 6 months, until they start producing stuff here, and we're still going to be consuming, you'll probably be consuming less of certain expensive products that have gone up in price, and it's going to cost you more when you consume them until they start being made domestically. That is a reality. Can't deny that. The USTR's annual trade report backs this with grim precision. China remains a fortress of subsidies and forced tech transfers. The EU clings to legacy protections. Even allies like South Korea and Taiwan deploy tax tricks, regulatory filters, and cultural barriers to frustrate American competition. The resulting imbalance has helped hollow out America's industrial core, flooded the U.S. with artificially cheap goods, because a lot of stuff made outside America is made out of crap, and left entire regions better known for fentanyl than for foundries, meaning our country has been going to crap because of our imbalanced trade. And the point of Liberation Day is not that we're going to start a trade war, but we're ending the trade brutalization we've been getting from the rest of the world. So Liberation Day then is not merely symbolic, it's long overdue. For 50 years, the consensus position was that America should absorb these shocks for the sake of global harmony. Trump's first term cracked that consensus. His second appears ready to bury it. Given the trade barriers faced by U.S. businesses and workers all around the globe, the gnashing of teeth over Trump's tariffs proposals bring to mind the words of the prophet Jeremiah. They dress the wound of my people with very little care, saying, peace, peace, when there's no peace at all. Those words, famously repurposed by Patrick Henry in the spring of 1775, are not out of place here. It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. I mean, they're saying, don't have a trade war. Don't have a we're already being buried in a trade war. We just don't realize it. Liberation Day is not a provocation. It's a recognition that the economic war was long ago declared, just not by us. Liberation Day essentially is we're fighting back. We're fighting back against your unfair trade practices, rest of the world. So when they're bitching and moaning about it, go cry in your brie, Pierre. We don't care. If the tariffs announced tomorrow are broad, high, and long-term, as they should be, they will finally give American producers the confidence to invest at home rather than abroad. That is an important thing. If he says, I'm going to take out these tariffs, as soon as you fix your issues, how do you start producing here? Because you wouldn't want to start building plants here when, for all you know, a month after you start building your plant here, the tariffs in the country you're working from are going to go away. They have to have some sort of permanence to them. If they're structured as reciprocal, they will force trade partners to disclose and dismantle their hidden barriers. If they're hybrid, they will combine revenue generation, diplomatic leverage, and industrial policy under one umbrella. In any scenario, the old rules will no longer apply. And if some investors are hoping this is another boy who cried tariff, meaning we're pretending we're going to be implementing tariffs, but not really anything noticeable. If that some investors are hoping it's another boy who cried tariff moment, or that Trump's tariffs are nothing but a bluff, they may be misreading the moment and the man. Trump has sold us too hard to walk away quietly. Liberation Day will be remembered as the day America said we will not subsidize our own decline. Not with tax policy, not with trade policy, not with silence. This will be the beginning of the trade war. This will not be the beginning of the trade war. It's the beginning of the end of the trade war. The day America started fighting back. Very, very well written. Very, very well written. There you go. If the 300 to 600 billion revenues estimates are right, the economics debate in 2028 is going to be wild. Wild. American products are not kosher except our weapons. Yeah, apparently. They love our weapons. Do we still get French bread? You can make, as long as you're making it here. As long as you're making it here. All right. I think that's my show and I'm sticking to it. I got to do some quick math here. Let me do some quick math. Some quick math. The greatest wealth redistribution in the history of mankind was the gutting of the American middle class. That was tragic. Tragic. Tragic indeed. I will tell you that, alas, we did not reach our goal tonight. So I'm spared from going to Snow White. I am spared from going to Snow White. So we're going to take down our banner. We didn't reach our goal. It was not for lack of, it was a valiant effort. We did not reach our goal. So, I'll throw it out there another time. It'll come. It'll come. You're going to get me there eventually. Eventually, you're going to get me there. With respect to tomorrow and the ongoing Karen Reed trial, I didn't see this afternoon anyone live streaming the jury selection. You need to follow me at goodlogic.locals.com. There I will announce if I have any, if I see that there's actually, streaming of the actual jury voir dire and questioning of them, I will stream it. And I'll try to put up notice and say, okay, I'm going to start up like in a half hour or so, and I will be streaming it. And I'll have my thumbnail ready to go, so I can go. But I'm not going to sit there doing these streams where I'm reading all day different court decisions on this. That I don't see the point to. I don't see the point to that. I'm not planning on doing that. So I urge you to check out goodlogic.locals.com. It's free to sign up. You get notifications of everywhere I ever am, anywhere in social media. And you can follow me there and turn on your alerts there. And that way you know where you can find me, whether it's here on this channel, whether it's on what time my regular show is supposed to be scheduled to start, and probably start within a few minutes of that, and what other appearances I'm making, whether it's on Spaces, someone else's channel, on X, whatever it is, you'll be able to find me there. It's at goodlogic.locals.com. And certainly now, as I'm doing the Karen Reed trial, if you want to know when I'm going to be streaming, that's where you'll get all your notifications there. I urge you to sign up there, goodlogic.locals.com. While you're here, please like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Like, share, subscribe. Do it. I thank you for joining me, and I will see you, God willing, tomorrow. Bugs, they, them, not for you. They, them, not for you. They, them, not for you. Sorry, lab meat is they, them. Bugs, you just don't eat, period. No one should be that. No one, even they, them should be. Even they, them. That's not even for they, them. That's what it is. Lab meat is for they, them. Bugs is not for humans. So don't eat the bugs. Do not eat the bugs. See locals. What am I seeing in locals? I missed you there. I'll stick with making challah. You should. Challah is yummy. Challah is yummy. Sorry about that. I wasn't gonna. I meant to check locals. So sorry that I hit you there. But instead of French bread, yeah. Challah is a better choice than over French bread. I thank you all and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Stay good. Good night. And Godspeed.